This is absolutely massive.
Pleasure to be here.
I've admired you for a long time, initially for your football ability, but since then definitely as a person and as a friend, it's been a great journey we've had so far. We've ticked over the 7 years of friendship, and I think that means we're locked in for life. So
That's true.
Fantastic news for us. But mate, welcome. I'm really, really happy to have you here.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to be here. I've seen a few of the videos so far, and yeah, keen to be a part of it.
I also will do a quick plug before we start. The logo and all of the creative stylings of Let's Talk NPL Football have been done by Jordan Brown. So if you need anything out there, he's definitely your man. But let's get stuck in, George. So you were definitely like the most talented player I've ever played with, and I'd be happy to tell anyone that.
Thank you.
Alon Blumgart might be a bit upset, but this is how I feel.
You'll be fine.
And you signed your first professional contract at 16 with Melbourne Victory, and you're probably the most diligent worker that I've met, and really kind of committed a lot of your life to football. But then injuries seem to just keep coming your way, and I was wondering how you felt about all the 1%ers that you put in and all the hard work you put in to be a footballer, and then for your body to just give up on you so many times. What was the emotions attached to that?
Yeah, good question. I think it's hard to talk about football for me without talking about injuries, because obviously they took over and ended up ending my career per se.
It was definitely a career.
But yeah, I think as I was playing, I tried not. Obviously, you try not to let them get to you. I think that's quite a common thing people do. But I think just pushing away the emotions was my coping mechanism. I think I never wanted to acknowledge how frustrating it was. Obviously, it was quite tough every time you got another setback. But I think the biggest thing for me was just not letting it get the better of me, because I thought things like the emotions stopped me from being disciplined. The emotions stopped me from being motivated. I think they were two things that at the time, I knew I couldn't let slip. So for me, it was about pushing them away and not dealing with them. And I think that's had repercussions moving forward, that I think I try to take the emotion out of a lot of things, and I think it can be good, but it also can be quite negative as well.
Absolutely. So when you say you kind of push things away, what does that look like in practice? Were you just avoiding it, or were you trying to actively think about other things? And did it ever come to a point where it all kind of came together and was a bit dark? I think that a common theme that I've heard throughout these episodes, and speaking to people around the idea of pushing away emotions, is that by pushing it away, it always comes back at some point, and that actually by bottling it up, the eruption, if you may, or the result is actually a lot bigger than maybe the initial feeling was. Did you ever have any really dark moments attached to those injuries where you think it was maybe exacerbated by the way you push your emotions away?
Absolutely. I think looking back now, it's quite evident that did happen, because obviously when I was getting injuries, when I was playing at a higher level, the next morning I was the first one in at 7 o'clock seeing the physios, getting scans, because that's what I had to do. But then later on, as I got more injuries, I kind of imploded at times. And I think the bigger ones, the more debilitating injuries, like my hamstring tear and my shoulder reconstruction, I think those ones really got the better of me. And I think there were times where I just locked myself down one end of my room, my house, and just sit there we called it death room, which is pretty grim. It was a bit of a joke as well, but it was kind of also a bit true. And I just sit there, lights off, watch shows all day, not talk to anyone. It was very antisocial, quite depressive behaviour. And I think looking back, that was definitely something that I wouldn't have called it something like depression or anything like that. Then I still wouldn't call it depression, but I think there was some depressive thoughts in there for sure. And it's something that I never really thought about or dealt with. And I think the injuries, maybe you're right, bottling it up over those years, when I got them later on, I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to see anyone until I was at a certain point that I could move around and walk again. And I think they definitely did get the better of me as I progressed later on.
Yeah, when you look back, you obviously mentioned that there's like an element of you kind of have to be a professional. You have to be sharp all the time, and you really there can be a bit of an emotional detachment to a lot of professionals. Do you look back on that time and think like I wish I did things a bit differently, or is that if you had your time again, would you do the exact same thing?
I think at the time it was almost necessary. I think I like to think of myself as not a confidence player, and I can say that because I would always try and push away. If I did 3 bad passes in a row, I wouldn't let that 4th one be bad because I would always try and keep a level head, and I think that was stopping the emotional part of football coming through. And I think that's a necessary part of it, because obviously there are setbacks, and if you let them get to you, I think you'll just get eaten alive in that industry. So yeah, I think like over the years I've built up this wall of don't worry about this, don't worry about that, just get on with it, be the first one at training, work hard, and things will come. So I think that no, I wouldn't have changed it. I think it was something that it was a mechanism that I developed over playing football for years and years that was completely necessary.
Yeah. So you mentioned that injuries ultimately ended your career, which is a really, really challenging thing for someone, particularly young, to endure. Going to post-football where football was, for all intents and purposes, your identity for a very long time, how did you go about kind of hitting that crossroads where you're like, all right, this is very clearly a moment in my life where I'm going to have to try and work out what's next after 10 years of everything kind of being set out for you? How did you attack that? Was there a conscious decision to try and get away from football? And I guess how did you go about redefining your identity?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think I'm still dealing with that now, because obviously for, like you said, 10 years or even longer, it was everything to me. Like I worked for it, I trained for it, I spoke about it. It was like I ate differently because of it. I gave up, I sacrificed things for it. So it was who I was for a long time. And I think coming out of that, I definitely, when I realized I wasn't going to be a footballer, I just like pushed away as much as I could. Like for having played for so long, you'd think I'd have like hundreds of, just like a lot of friends around football, but I just pushed them all away. I think you and I have one other person I consider someone that I met through football, and everyone else unfortunately is not a part of my life anymore. And I think that it was quite rough what I did with some people, but I just didn't want to have to deal with it. A lot of the relationships I had through football were about football. We'd go to coffee, but we'd talk about football, and there were things that I didn't want to associate with, things I didn't want to think about, things I didn't want to talk about anymore. And I think that for me was something that I just tried like consciously to push away, for sure.
Do you think you ever felt like a burden through our friendship, obviously being connected through football? Do you think that there was ever any times where you felt that like being friends with me, that it kind of just reminded you of football too much and made it difficult for you?
No, and I think that's something that, like, with yourself and the other friend that I have, our relationship is we met through football, but I think, like, our dads went to school together and we'd hang out with each other's friends outside of football, and I think we built something that was bigger than that, and I think that's why I never thought once to myself that, like, this was not going to continue when I stopped playing football, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're still friends now. And it doesn't, we don't talk about football. We do at times and we still play and it's really fun, but it's not something that we need to be friends, and I think that's why it's remained.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful that it didn't feel like that, because you're an important friend to me. But going into post-football life, you've mentioned a few ways that you like coped during those times. Has that evolved over time? Do you think you're similar in the way that like you find that yourself, I guess, pushing away negative emotions and I guess, like avoiding a little bit about those issues that everyone kind of faces in life?
Yeah, definitely. I think you build up habits over time, and I think my habit was doing that, and I've definitely that's definitely transferred into my just personal life. And I think it's something that I don't think that's for everyone does that. I think that's a personality trait of mine, but I think it's something that I need to sort of address, because I think when you get a challenge or there's something that you need to deal with, you need to hit it head on without running away from it, or I think suppressing those things is a really bad habit to have. And I think it developed through football, and I'm not going to blame football for it. It's definitely a lot myself as well, but it's something that I definitely need to sort of change that habit, create new habits, I guess.
Yeah, and another thing we spoke about earlier was that football kind of reinforces a cycle of craving achievement. So you and I both have experienced the kind of the cycle or the structure of football where you train, 3 to 5 times a week, and then you have your public performance of how well you're going each weekend, and there's always like a very clear signpost. And it's something that I've definitely struggled with, where like a lot of my self-worth is attached to achieving things. So like I'll often have a day, and my down days where I'm feeling just really low and off often come from the fact that I haven't ticked things off my to-do list, or I haven't achieved anything tangible. Do you find that idea still pervades your life and still exists for you? And has it caused you similar problems that it has for me?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were talking about this, and I think that you're in a world, you're in a world where progression is key, and it's very evident when you're moving up and when you're moving down. You're making teams, and I think I kind of loved that because I was good, and I was always getting positive feedback. I was always making the next team. I was one of the younger players in a team, but I was doing well. The coach always liked me, or most coaches, some. And I think I really enjoyed that process, because obviously when you're in a success-driven industry or a progression-driven industry and you're progressing, it's awesome. It's great. It's like addictive almost. And I think carrying that out of football, I think I definitely like put a lot of my self-worth into what I'm doing as opposed to other things. So I think it's definitely put a lot of pressure. I think I'm quite critical of myself for that reason. And I think that is also something that came from football, because you need to always look yourself in the mirror and be like, how can I be better? Was I the best today? No. How can I be that person? So I think that's definitely carried over, and it's somewhat exhausting being there, because like everything you do is are you doing something different? Are you the best there? And if you're not, is that just insanely unmotivating? And do you want to keep going? Is something that goes through my head quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's definitely stemmed from being in that world for so long.
Yeah. Whilst you're speaking, it kind of reminded me of a conversation I had with a mate, where on his podcast he tends to ask people and his guests, are you proud of yourself? And I think it's like, it can be quite a jarring question, because it like really hits to the core of your self-image and your self-worth. But I'm interested to hear your answer to that question and why you feel that way, because I think it can be really really indicative of your relationship with football and like your relationship with life after football as well. So I'm interested to hear, are you proud of yourself?
It's a big question. It's a loaded question. Like, to be honest, like I'd say no. I'd say I'm not proud of myself, and I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. I think and like I'm not going to talk about football here. It's not really a football question. I think like that I could always, I think my potential for what I could be doing is quite different to what I am actually doing at the moment. I also think, as we were discussing, I'm quite like critical of myself, and I think that plays a part in that question. And I also think the fact that a lot of my self-worth or what I would consider being proud of myself stems from my achievements. And I think post-football, I don't think I have really achieved what I would consider the equivalent of what I achieved in football. And I think that's something that I'm always comparing to, because like I feel like I have slightly unfinished business there, and like I haven't been able to finish it. So that's always like, it's almost like a little chip on my shoulder that I have, that like that was where I can get, and I kind of like want that again in another sort of platform or sphere. Yeah. I don't feel like I have that or I've got that yet.
Yeah. So as your mate listening to that, like I am challenging you wholeheartedly on that, because I am really proud of you, and I actually think that you wouldn't still be in my life if I wasn't proud of you. Like the way that you have recovered from, like, I think a really traumatic position, to have like the highs of what you experienced at such a young age, to then have it taken away from you so many times. I'm hugely proud of you, and I think I understand that, you know, that me saying that won't change how self-critical you are of yourself, but it's important for you to hear, and I think it's important for people listening to hear that. It's almost like a cautionary tale, I guess, that even if someone, a young Jordan Brown, if that exists, I don't know if that sort of talent is still around in football, but if a young player who's really progressing well is watching this, to know that at some point your career ends, whether it's at 21 or at 35 or whatever it is, at some point it ends. And if your entire world and your entire sense of pride in yourself is based in football, no matter how like intelligent and emotionally aware of yourself you are, it's a really hard thing to bounce back from. It just really is, and it always will be. So it doesn't mean focusing less on football. It doesn't mean giving it less. It just means being aware that your worth as a person is and always will be and has to be independent of whether you are dominating 90 minutes on the weekend or whether you're injured or whether you're retired. It's just like, it's so important. I think I really, really appreciate you sharing so honestly so people can hear that, because I think it's a really, really important message for them to hear.
Yeah, it's big coming from you, and I think I really do need to take that on board and be less critical.
Absolutely. Well, George, it's been a wide-ranging chat. We've really dug deep, and I'm really grateful that you dug deep with me. I think a huge amount of people would benefit from hearing from you. So thank you so much. Thanks for being a great friend. We're in an apartment that currently, as of right now, we're going to be sharing for a little bit of time, which is very exciting.
Very exciting.
So mate, I can't wait for many more years of friendship, and thanks for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Dave. I really like what you're doing with this channel, and yeah.